Our first story is, so there was an election in Nicaragua. Now, you know, the United States, anytime there's a government that wants to help the people in Central America, Latin America, South America, what do? They try to overthrow that government and install a puppet of the United States and corporate America so they can extract the wealth out of them, the natural resources out of that country, and give it to corporations instead of give it to the people, like in Venezuela. Right, with their oil. Okay. So now we're doing it to Nicaragua again. Now, ever since I was a kid, we've been messing around with Nicaragua because Nicaragua wants to try to help their people. And you can't do that. You have to become a servant of the United States and the corporations that are inside the United States. So Antony Blinken, who's the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, Antony, that's his name, not Anthony, Antony Blinken, Antony, this is the press release from the State Department. It says new sanctions are following the sham elections in Nicaragua. Because you know how pristine our elections are. You know how pristine our elections are, right? Okay. It's not like the guy with the most money. Anyway. This is from that press release from the State Department. The United States is by the way, let me bring in some people who know a little bit about this so they can comment on it as we go along. Let's welcome our guests. We have the co-host of the progressive talk show, The Convo Couch, which discusses daily news cycles and introduces new grassroots personalities. Please welcome to the show Fiorella Isabel and Craig Pasta Jardula. Hello, how are you, Convo Couch?
We're doing great, Jimmy. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us to talk about, foreign policy and imperialism, especially these elections that, are being called a sham when you just mentioned yourself. Our elections are so pristine here in North America.
And so you were down at the election. So let me just read Antony Blinken's press release. He says the United States is acting to promote accountability for Nicaraguan officials in the wake of the November sham election in Nicaragua. Who promotes accountability for the United States politicians when we illegally invade other countries and kill 1 million people? Does anybody ever promote accountability for us? You know how George Bush and Dick Cheney are in jail right now? Oh no, that never happened. You know how they organized a torture program internationally and they all went to jail? Oh no, nobody's in jail for that. Nobody even got prosecuted. There was never even a hearing about torture. So I don't know why we feel like why we have the right to promote accountability for other countries, but we don't ever have accountability for the United States. Ever. We don't even give our people health care. Do you know that? Where's the accountability for the lead in Flint? There's no accountability ever anywhere. Today, the Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control imposed sanctions against the Nicaraguan Public Ministry and 9 Nicaraguan government officials. So on November 7th, the Ortega Murillo government held an election that denied Nicaraguans their ability to vote in free and fair elections following months of repression and the imprisonment of 39 individuals, including 7 potential presidential candidates, opposition members, journalists, students, and members of a civil society. It sounds bad. Now, let me bring 2 people in who are actually down there to watch that election. Now, what can you tell me? How much that's 100% garbage, right? What the State Department is saying? And why do they care about Nicaragua so much? They really don't give a shit about the elections in the United States. So this is them acting at the behest, once again, of U.S. corporations. So what did you find out about the elections when you were there?
All right. Well, I'll start off by saying that recently Joe Biden signed the Renacer Act. The Renacer Act is the act that allows these sanctions to happen. Ro Khanna recently released a statement as of 2 days ago justifying these sanctions because they're trying to paint Daniel Ortega, who is the current president of Nicaragua, as a dictator, of course, as somebody that jailed his opposition. Well, one of the biggest lies of this whole thing was that he jailed his opposition. He didn't jail his opposition that were pre-candidates, is what they call themselves. So you're a pre-candidate for president, Jimmy, because if you ever want to run for president, you could. That's what they mean by pre-candidates. None of these people filed to run for office. And also, in 2018, there was an attempted and failed coup that the United States backed in Nicaragua. And in that coup, a lot of these coup plotters that are actually in prison, they were involved in that. And so what happened is they try to do it again. When Daniel Ortega gave them amnesty, to the dismay of many of the Sandinistas who actually wanted to hold them accountable, he said that, please, all I ask is that you never try this again, is that you never try to overthrow our government. Because in any major country in the world, when you try to overthrow the government, you're going to be in trouble. So that's why these people are behind bars. And so the State Department, the mainstream media narrative managers, and the propagandists made it out to be like he's just jailing people who are on the ballot. But Pasta can tell you, when we went in there were 6 candidates on the ballot, and none of them were in jail.
Yeah, also the fact that a lot of these people, these pre-candidates, and that's what they just throw out there. They throw that sentiment out there like, oh, it's pre-candidates, making that kind of viable. They're not. They would never register. But a lot of these candidates, they didn't want to disclose their funding. And a lot of the funding we found out, Ben Norton has done some amazing work on this, comes from NGOs like the NED. And these groups have always tried to throw the government there. So this whole false narrative that the fact that he jailed his opposition is just completely false. And he did show restraint, and he did give some of them amnesty. So right off the bat, when they say that he just eliminated his competition and that's why he was able to win the election, it's completely and utterly false.
Yeah, and just one more thing, I just want to say that in terms of those particular lies, he was also backed by the people. They were trying to say he was unpopular, and poll after poll showed that he was a highly popular figure, and they were trying to use that as to say he's oppressing the people from voting. There was over a 65% turnout, and he won with 75% of the vote.
So okay, let's get to the sanctions. As a result, the U.S. Department of the Treasury announced sanctions against the Nicaraguan public ministry and 9 Nicaraguan officials. The public ministry played a primary role. Hang on. The public ministry played a primary role in the regime's arrests of potential opposition presidential candidates. Now, that's what you just talked about. They're not even presidential candidates. I mean, God, if I could write this funny, I would be famous. I wouldn't be doing a show in my garage, I'll tell you that. Yeah. The public ministry played a primary role in the regime's arrest of potential opposition presidential candidates, other leaders of civil society, the private sector, students, and journalists in advance of the elections. The U.S. Department of the Treasury designated the 9 Nicaraguan officials pursuant to EO 13851, I guess that's Executive Order 13851, for being officials of the government of Nicaragua or having served as officials of the government of Nicaragua at any time on or after January 10th, 2007. So their crime was being a part of the government? That's what that says. So Antony Blinken from the State Department, who works at the behest of criminal corporations in the United States, is now trying to overthrow a democratically elected government that's trying to help its people and not the government or not the corporations of America. And to do that, they're making up crap like this. This is the kind of stuff, with a straight face, they put this out there.
Yeah.
These 9 individuals facilitate the Ortega Murillo regime's repression, including its human rights abuses, or manage We're the biggest penal colony in the world, the United States. We put black and brown people in prison at such higher rates than their population. The oppressive regime is right here in the United States. The oppressive regime is right here in the United States. The state gives guns to homicidal maniacs, and they go out and they shoot black and brown people with impunity. From coast to coast. And they also shoot white people with impunity from coast to coast. So this idea that there's another government that is more corrupt than the United States, that has worse elections than the United States, and that is more repressive than the United States is ridiculous. Okay. These 9 individuals facilitate the Ortega Murillo's regime's repression, including its human rights abuses, or manage institutions that finance the undemocratic Ortega Murillo regime or otherwise sustain it at the expense of the Nicaraguan people. They care so much about the Nicaraguan people, Steph. You know that. Antony Blinken and
Right.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they don't care about the American people because they don't give them health care in the middle of a deadly pandemic. But they do care about the Nicaraguan people. They care a lot about them and their freedom, turns out. I bet they don't imprison half as many people as we do in the United States. I bet that, huh? With these new sanctions, the United States, joined by our international partners, continues to take concrete actions to respond to the Ortega Murillo government's attacks on civil liberties and free and fair elections.
Sorry.
So no, go ahead. So you want to hear?
No, free and fair elections just makes me laugh when talking compared to the United States elections. We put this down when we went there, Jimmy. We didn't just go to observe the elections. We went to scrutinize the elections. The Convo Couch, at the end of the day, doesn't care about their political ideology when it comes to looking at the elections. We didn't care who was on the ballot. We just wanted to make sure the framework, the process, and the procedures were in place. And let me tell you this much: if the United States had an election like the Nicaraguans did, 95% of our Congress wouldn't even be there because it's a free, transparent, and verifiable election.
So you
basically.
Go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, so you were there. This is your groove. This is your wheelhouse, election integrity, and you're saying you witnessed, you observed the election. You don't care about who won, who lost, or whatever. You say that it was on the up and up, and it was much better than an election in America. Correct?
Absolutely. I mean, having observed the elections here the last few years, we saw people in Santa Monica at colleges wait 7 hours to vote in the Democratic primary, ordering pizza, ordering food because they were there for so long. You go to Nicaragua, and first of all, it takes between 2 to 5 minutes to vote at the largest precinct in the country, which is located in Bilwi, which is where we actually went. It's an autonomous area of indigenous people. They have their own municipalities, their own government, but their elections are all run nationally the same. And first of all, you have to show an ID, which would be considered right-wing by our standards. You have to show an ID. Everybody's automatically registered to vote at 16 years old. And when you get there, you can look up your ID via computer, or it's listed on a paper as well. And they have people helping you all over the place, guiding you. If you have disabilities, they will literally take you in your wheelchair to where you need to be because they don't always have elevators at all for people there to go to. And the rooms are called juntas, and they're divided by the closest distance from your home. So everything is organized and set so people don't have to worry about, where do I go? Or they can track their vote much easier. And when you go in there, it's a paper ballot. There's no computer. There's nothing connected to the internet. And what you once again have to check in, and they have a list of IDs, pictures of everybody's ID, and they once again have to verify that you are who you say you are. And after you vote, you get this black ink on your thumb, so that way you're not allowed to vote anywhere else, and it stays with you for days. So I guess by our standards in America, by what a lot of liberals say, that their vote would be Jim Crow, their voting system would be Jim Crow on steroids. There's no vote by mail. There's no drop-off boxes. It's like they combined the Democrat and the Republican fights, the things they fight about elections, and they made it one whole thing, and they eliminated the internet. So there is a way to go back, and the counts are done wherever the person votes each time.
I want to talk about that. That's where the vote is cast, it is counted. And there is multiple parties in the room. Remember in the last election, the general election, a lot of Republicans were kicked out and they put things on the windows so they couldn't see in. Well, when we went in there, we always would check, what party are you with? Oh, you're a Sandinista. Oh, you're part of the opposition party. Oh, you're part of the third opposition party. And we explained that's like having a Republican, a Democrat, and a Libertarian in the room, or maybe a Green Party in the room. They're all present there. And where the vote is cast, it is counted. And that just secures the chain of custody, which is so important when it comes to elections. Because once you get these ballots outside the room, who knows where they're going, where they're stopping, what's doing with them, and where they end up. So, it's just a clean, secure system that I wish we had. If we had half as good of a system as there wouldn't be so many questions when it comes to our elections, Jimmy. It was solid. And I said this before, the people of Managua, the people of Nicaragua, they have a voting system to be proud of.
So, and we're sanctioning them, and we're doing it under the pretense of that they ran a sham election. And of course, people who are on the ground say they ran a great election. And of course, this is, people don't understand, our government overthrows other governments on the regular. That's what we do. We're the most undemocratic terrorists in the world. The United States. There's no bigger terrorist organization in the world than the United States and the United States military. There's no bigger terrorist organization in the world. None. We make Russia look like a pimple on our ass with the amount of terror that we inflict, the amount of death that we inflict, the amount of violence that we inflict. And this is violence, what we're doing to Nicaragua right now, because let's remember, who gets hurt by sanctions is the people get hurt by the sanctions. The government doesn't get hurt. So what they're trying to do is put a hurt on the people of Nicaragua so that they will somehow get disenchanted with their government they just elected, and so that they can now foment unrest inside Nicaragua and install a puppet government. That's exactly what the United States does all the time. That's what we're trying to do now. If Trump was doing this, we'd all be screaming, what a fascist. But since it's Antony Blinken and Joe Biden, nobody on the left is screaming about this. And you'll never hear the squad talk about it because they are also imperialists. They're apologists for the imperialist class. That is exactly what they're doing. Okay.
And where the hell is Tulsi on this too, right? I know she's not in office anymore, but people are saying, Pasta, aren't you upset for what she said for Kyle Rittenhouse? No, I'm upset what she hasn't said about Nicaragua here, because this is going to hurt thousands of people. Thousands of people are going to be without medicine, without education, without food. We're going to try to starve them out, like you said, Jimmy, to turn them against their government. And people need to speak up about this, because this is imperialism at its finest.
The reality is too, Jimmy, that the Sandinistas government has on data, on paper. You can ask anybody. Ben Norton was there. Katwachon News was there. A lot of journalists were there. Election observers were there. We were all told by the Sandinistas, but also by the people who weren't even, in love with Daniel Ortega, that they had a fair and free election. And they were specifically told that the reason a lot of people support the Sandinistas government is because he has increased the roads, he has increased the schools, the access to potable water, and they have health care. They have health care for all, something we don't even have here in the United States. And that's to me, it just goes to show you, Nicaragua is the second poorest country in Latin America, and yet they can provide people fair and free elections. They can provide them health care. They can give them free public university. That's one of the other things. We spoke to a gentleman that lives there. And yet, we talk about democracy and humanitarian aid when we don't give our own people that. So that just goes to show you. And by the way, we weren't alone. Like I said, there were hundreds of other people observing. And one of the lies that we caught them is the New York Times woman was literally saying that they were closing polling stations, that they were, preventing people from voting. Something that we do here, that we have witnessed here happen. That never happened. And it was so easy to debunk these lies because we were all on the ground.
So going on with Antony Blinken and the State Department's statement on Nicaragua, they say, we welcome that Canada and the United Kingdom also imposed targeted measures today, as the OAS, that's the Organization of American States, which is completely corrupted. The OAS General Assembly made clear on November 12th, under President Ortega and Vice President Murillo, the Nicaraguan government moves toward further isolation if it continues to undermine democracy and deny Nicaraguans their human rights. So there's, again, they just make these, again, if you cared about human rights, maybe you'd stop bombing the fucking rest of the world. Maybe you wouldn't have turned Libya into a slave state. Maybe you wouldn't have turned Iraq into a failed state. Maybe you wouldn't have bombed 26,000 bombs in Syria. I mean, we're the biggest. We have a drone program that kills 90% innocent people. Joe Biden just killed 12 people, a whole family of aid workers in Afghanistan. Nobody don't give a shit. This is your Democrat. You vote Democrat, you get good people. These are murdering maniacs, is what Joe Biden and Antony Blinken is, and the United States government. Murdering fucking maniacs. Imperialists who are going to other countries and fucking with other countries. You think that Russia buying a Facebook ad is screwing with our elections? Look what they're doing. They're getting the whole world to impose sanctions on them. That's what Antony Blinken and Joe Biden is doing, like the pieces of shit that they are. And TYT and The Intercept and CNN and MSNBC will tell you got to vote for that guy, even though he's a murdering maniac who's demented. Okay.
You know, Jimmy, too, on your show, Mike Gravel was on, and he said this. This is very important for people to understand. Sanctions are an act of war. Sanctions are an act of war. And there's no such thing as this bullshit statement that we're having targeted sanctions.
Yeah,
we're going to target this. It doesn't work like that way. The most vulnerable people, the poor people, those are the ones who suffer from sanctions. So when we sanction the hell out of these countries, it is an act of war, and it's one of the most racist things we can do. We are starving out brown and black people all over the world. So when the woke freaking crowd keeps crying about Kyle Rittenhouse, but completely ignores this, it just burns my ass.
That's right. That's exactly right, because they're all about virtue signaling, and they don't give a shit about the facts or actually helping people. And there is nobody. And if you're looking at how people are approaching the mandates, and they're wanting nurses and or EMTs and firemen to be fired, and bus drivers to be fired, the least amongst us, the frontline workers, the people who are heroes, those are shit libs. There is nothing more vicious. There's no one more vicious than a bleeding heart liberal. Nobody is more vicious. And this is proof of it. So I love when they go, we welcome that Canada and the United Kingdom also impose targeted measures. Yeah, we love it when other countries are willing to be hypocritical, murderous maniacs like we are also. We like it. The United Kingdom, if there's anybody who's against colonization, I think it would be the UK. We stand with the region in calling for a return to democracy in Nicaragua. When do we return to democracy in America? Because we know we live in an oligarchy. Our democracy was stolen from us a long time ago. The Cambridge study proved beyond a doubt that we don't live in a democracy. There's no democracy in the United States. If you think there is, you're a chump. Because if you don't make if you're not in the upper 10% of wage earners in America, the wealthy, what you want reflected in legislation is never reflected in legislation, ever. You know whose is? The upper 10% of earners. That's it. That's it. We live in an oligarchy, and it doesn't matter. Right now, 90% of the country wants single-payer health care. We ain't getting it. 70-80% of the country wants marijuana legalized. We ain't getting it. Right now, 70-80% of the country wants student debt relief. We ain't getting it. 70-80% of the country wants a fucking minimum wage. We ain't getting it. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a fucking oligarchy that is rapacious and also imperialistic. We're the terrorists, ladies and gentlemen. Not Nicaragua, not Ortega, us, the United States. We're the terrorists. And so let's go to here. What Ben Norton tweeted out: Nicaragua's democratically elected National Assembly condemned the meddling by the U.S.-controlled Organization of American States. That's the OAS. It officially called for Nicaragua to withdraw from the corrupt OAS, which orchestrated a coup in Bolivia in 2019. That's your OAS right there. So yes, they are. Yeah. Let's go. One more tweet from me. He says Facebook so-called secure. And by the way, we reported this. Facebook was censoring activists from Nicaragua, right? And they were saying, "Oh, we got to get rid of the bots." And they were censoring actual people who are speaking out about the politics in their own country, and Facebook takes it upon themselves and their goons from the Pentagon to censor actual people during an election in Nicaragua. And here's that's what he's talking about. He says Facebook's so-called security and intelligence teams, which censor critics of the U.S. government, are run by former spies and other U.S. government officials. We revealed that. Ben Nemo, right? Isn't that his name? For all intents and purposes, Facebook is an outsourced arm of the U.S. national security state. That's what Facebook is. Facebook is not there for you. Facebook is there for the U.S. national security state. That's what you're dealing with. Also, it must be stressed that the new law that the U.S. government just passed to crush Nicaragua with more sanctions, the Renaissance Act, calls for sanctions on members of the leftist Sandinistas front and their families. They're going after their families. It's United States economic war on Nicaraguan civilians. It's on their entire family. Here, I'll read it. You probably can't read it. It says party members and elected officials from Sandinista National Liberation Front and their family members. Those are the people they're going after. Targeting. That's who they're targeting. Max Blumenthal tweeted out, in coverage of Nicaragua's elections, the State Department stenographers that populate corporate media relied on, Unas Abiertas. That's a shady, previously unknown outfit to allege low voter turnout. Benjamin Norton exposes the group as a front for U.S.-backed opposition. So that's how it always, they have a pretend news organization, I'm going to guess probably funded by the CIA, or the OA, or somebody nefarious is funding them, and then they got them to say that it was a low voter turnout. So it's illegitimate. Was it a low voter turnout?
No, it was 65% voter turnout. And so the OAS is in danger of being kicked out of Nicaragua. All they're doing is waiting on the president, Daniel Ortega, because, Jimmy, they just also banned him and any Nicaraguan official from coming into the United States. So apart from sanctioning them, they just banned them from coming into the United States because they can't lie about all the things we saw. Our video on Facebook, somebody shared it, was completely labeled as misinformation about elections when we're literally there on the ground. I mean, and people in the New York Times, they didn't show up. They weren't there on the ground, but it didn't stop Business Insider from writing a smear piece on us and on RT's Caleb Maupin, saying that Moscow has ties to the Sandinistas government, and that that we were paid by the Sandinistas to sway our criticism, that there were no critical journalists there, that they were kicked out, and they were complaining about the OAS not having access. Well, the Nicaraguan government isn't going to allow the OAS in there when they have previously couped other countries. I mean, it's just common sense. I wouldn't allow that either.
Yeah, and Jimmy, we're going to release a video soon of us getting in the room with the election officials, and we did not go easy on them. We hit them hard with question after question after question after question, and they were happy to answer it. They were confident to answer it because they spend time working on these elections. They actually trained their people for 3 months. They had 10 times the staff of volunteers and workers there than we do have in the United States. So that's why they were very secure in their elections, because they knew what they were doing. They were ready for this, and they were proud to have those elections. And we didn't go easy. We went hard. In fact, we still have questions that we're waiting from the foreign ministry, and that's what the Convo Couch does. And we got on the ground there. And breaking news, by the way, Jimmy, TYT wasn't on the ground. We were looking for them. We couldn't find them. I was like, Chang, Anna, where you at? So we were there, and so were the observers. And they were actually censoring other observers' Facebooks in the rooms with us. They were shutting them down. So, everything they say is BS. And we know from firsthand experience from going and witnessing these elections, these are free, fair, and transparent elections.
So we're living in that Orwellian future dystopia that he promised us, and here we are. And people will defend. Most of the country, or all the Democrats that I've seen the polls say, that the Democrats are super okay with Facebook censoring people like this. That even if it catches good information, it's still better to censor. This is not the America I grew up in. I can't believe how fascist and authoritarian people who self-describe as Democrats have become. It's totally flipped the script from when I was a kid. It used to be the right-wingers were the authoritarian fascists, and now the left wing, they're not left. They're Democrats. The Democrats is a right-wing party. So we don't have a major left-wing party in this country. We have two right-wing parties in this country. So the Democrats are now the ones. So it makes sense that they would be authoritarian because they're a right-wing party. And that's exactly what's happening. And they so care about the integrity of other and the people being oppressed in Nicaragua. That's what Joe Biden cares about. Except here it is, feds deliberately targeted Black Lives Matter protesters to disrupt the movement. That's from NPR. So that's what the United States does to its own citizens. That's what the United States does to its own citizens. And what were we doing in Cuba? Well, in Cuba, the U.S. rebukes Cuba for preventing civil liberties protests. Oh, you mean that they were that the United States? Isn't that kind of hilarious? And here they are, civil liberties protests, and the government are trying to fuck it up. And here they are trying to castigate Cuba for doing the same thing. Isn't that interesting? Hey, why don't you take care of the United States and leave Nicaragua alone? Oh, because corporations can make a lot of money in Nicaragua, and we can't let democracy catch on in the South. We can't let that happen. That would be bad for capitalism. You can't let socialism catch on. You can't let democracy catch on. So we got to squash it, put in a right-wing dictator who's a puppet to the United States and the corporations. And that's exactly what's going on. Anything else you'd like to add to this story?
Yeah, just to close off, I wanted to say when we were talking to leftists in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas in particular, one of them said that the left in America doesn't exist. It's a joke. They focus too much on social, empty,
Identity.
vacuous social
Yes.
issues. Like we had somebody go in there and try to tell Daniel Ortega's son to focus on LGBTQ issues when that country is facing sanctions. And it's not like we're minimizing those issues, but what they were saying is like, don't come in as an American leftist and try to impose your ideology on our country. And that's one of the things that I have a problem with the left here, is that they try to virtue signal and sort of dictate how one should believe. And I think that's the reason we don't have an organized, strong left in America. And you can see that with any opinion on the Rittenhouse case that differs from the mainstream narrative. You can see it in the way that they smear people for having a difference on the mandates or the COVID situation. And so what is interesting about the left in Latin America, particularly in Nicaragua, is that they focus on economics, on workers, on raising those standards. They really are a Christian country. They're not there when it comes to those issues like even marijuana, LGBTQ issues. They tend to be more conservative. But does that mean they're right wingers? No, we're not anybody to dictate how other people should run their country. And that feeling in itself that a lot of these woke liberals have is still part of that manifest destiny. It's still part of that Monroe Doctrine, because you think you're better than them and you think you have a right to tell people how to think and how to act, and you absolutely don't. So,
you know, and also too, just Jimmy, I can't wait to go back to the States. Right? And we were talking about this to a lot of the left wingers, progressives, how they run their elections. Like, you know, they don't have the mail-in, they don't have multiple days. But I also can't wait to go back and tell my mom and her friends, you know, the patriots, the Trumpers, that, hey, you know, you guys hate on socialism and communism all the time, but in Nicaragua, a socialist country, they have more of a representative democracy than we do over here. So that's the highlight of everything we've seen over there. And, you know, it was just an amazing experience. And I'm very glad we went, because that's what the Convo Couch does. And if anybody wants to understand the intricacies and the way the elections work, please go check us out. Our partner, Johnny Tsunami, Johnny Anti-Imperialist is what Max Blumenthal's been calling him. He's been doing some solid work with the elections in LA. Fee's been talking about all these bills that were written and showing that they're not racist. And, you know, I talk to every single election integrity activist I can across this country, from Georgia to Michigan to Wisconsin. So if you want to learn about the intricacies, please follow the Convo Couch. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to try to go to Honduras, because that's a very important election on the 28th. It's very important for Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, because if Xiomara Zelaya, who's Manuel Zelaya's wife, if she wins, that pulls back in the fold a socialist type of government who's going to be formed by the people and not just a puppet government for the United States. So everybody pay attention to what's going on the 28th in Honduras. Hopefully the Convo Couch will get permission to get on the ground. And thank you so much, Jimmy, for letting us come on and talk about our very important things, which is elections.
So if you guys are interested in the election integrity, what's happening in Nicaragua, Honduras, the Convo Couch is the place to go. Thank you all. Thank you both for making time and filling us in. And thanks for going down to Nicaragua and observing firsthand. Super appreciate you doing that.
thank you.
Hey, come see us do a live stand-up show in Portland, Oregon, the 26th and 27th of November. That's Thanksgiving weekend. See you there. And please join our premium program. Get a lot of extra stuff. We'll talk to you later.